Hey all, welcome to episode 2 of Tech Retro Views. In the first one we went over the details of the base model StarTAC. This one was known as the 3000, and aside from having that same sleek appearance of its more intelligent brethren, it was pretty watered down. Don't get me wrong, even as a base model I think Motorola treated their StarTAC line with a little more reverence, and so it didn't leave you totally high and dry feature-wise. You got some level of functionality to enhance the whole calling experience, not to mention storing phone numbers. But if you were a little more discriminating in your tech purchases, you probably would have held out for the next model up, the StarTAC 6000. This model was every bit as sleek and trim as the base model, but with some added bonuses. It was basically considered the mid-tier model, pretty much aimed at the corporate user or tech geek, specifically those who were looking to score this little mobile wonder but didn't want to shell out an arm and a leg to get one. Well, maybe, a couple fingers. And while it wasn't totally packed with every option the high-end model offered, the user-friendliness of everything that came on board this phone was a huge step up from the 3000. Released on September 30th, 1996, it was offered in a few different variants, not just two like the base model. You could pick from different colors and different display options like LED or LCD display, but I'll do a separate video on those variants since I want to keep the running time on this episode pretty reasonable. So for now, I just want to focus on one of the most common variants available. So, I've got here a new boxed StarTAC 6000 ready to open up. Let's get to it. Once again, we've got a manual, this time in Espanol, and tucked away on the inside cover is the warranty slip. And look, it's already a step up from the 3000 manual, because look here, they actually spiral bound it. Classy. Next up is the charger, which is actually different from the 3000 charger. This one is probably half the weight of the other one, a little thinner in design, with a sturdier, thicker cable, and also they are not interchangeable. That is, you can't plug a 6000 phone into a 3000 charger. The plug is exactly the same, but I guess the internal charger on the 3000 is different and the electronics aren't compatible with the 6000. But you can plug a 3000 phone into a 6000 charger. Go figure. So that's just an FYI out there, but it says so on the 3000 charger anyway that you can only use it with a 3000. Moving on. Here's that belt clip again. Here's the nickel metal hydride battery, which is what they typically came packed with, but not always. These offered the standard 1 hour of talk time and 14 hours of standby. That was enough to get most people by, since back then rates weren't cheap and people were minute conscious with how little they got each month in free minutes for what they had to shell out each month on their plan. And here's the star of the show itself. Looks nearly identical to the 3000, you might say. I mean, color-wise this one certainly is. Both the 3000 and the 6000 came in the same colors, but the 6000 had a few more to offer. They both weigh about the same, although I think the 3000 is a tad lighter, but the difference is really negligible. So, what are the differences then? On the outside there aren't too many, but there are crucial upgrades that I'll point out in just a bit. The biggest difference you'll see is when it's opened up. Not the same, folks, and I don't mean the carrier badging. For starters, check out the screens. The 3000 has that segmented LED display, which is really only good for dialing and storing numbers, not much else. But the mid-level 6000 has this dot matrix LED display, full of alphanumeric win. Granted, the 3000 has a 10-digit display for displaying full phone numbers with area codes. This is really a non-issue, as you're about to see why having an alphanumeric display makes the 6000 more versatile. And to be frank, this is actually a StarTAC 6000E. The E denotes the LED display, whereas the other variant had an LCD display, so sometimes that one was called the 6000C, but it's a minor variation. They're both 6000s and functioned exactly the same. Moving on to the keypad, you can probably see that it's plastic, not rubber, like the 3000, and it blends itself to the phone pretty flush, more so than the rubbery keypad, but still easy to feel your way around, especially with that little notch between 5 and 8. Of course, the power button sits completely flush with the case to prevent randomly hitting it. The tactile feedback is actually a bit firmer on this keypad, so you really know when you're hitting those keys, and only the numbers themselves light up on this keypad, as opposed to the whole periphery of each button, but it's still easy to read in the dark. You'll also notice the bottom row on the 6000 has the power, function, and end keys, but no volume key. Why? That's right, dedicated volume keys. The 6000 adds these keys to the side of the phone where it's easy to reach during a call if you want to adjust the earpiece volume, and it's pretty much been that way ever since, both for flip phones and smartphones alike. You can go up and down as you please, unlike that one button to control the volume. Before the StarTAC, Motorola had done the same thing with their microTACs. The cheapies like the 550 didn't have volume keys on the side, just the one on the keypad. But their Alpha line did have volume keys along with their more expensive models. Nowadays, it's not even an afterthought having volume keys on your phone. Any maker who omits that feature would pretty much be shooting themselves in the foot. Anyway, you might have also seen that there's no menu label on the One key to access all the features built into the phone. The solution? Motorola calls it the Smart Key. That's the middle button on the side of the phone. They did away with hitting function 1 on the keypad and installed this dynamic do-it-all button on the side, which was basically like the first OK button on cell phones. More on that in a moment when we get to the software on the 6000, but first let's take a look at the final hardware improvement on this handset. On the back, you'll see these 4 metal contacts at the bottom that are absent on the 3000. So, a little background info here. At the time, Motorola's microTAC phones were still dominating the market, and while there were tons of different models to choose from, they were more or less pretty similar, and they all shared universal parts, specifically batteries and chargers. And as far as batteries went, there were probably a good 10 or so different batteries available. You could choose the slimmest batteries, offering you basic talk times like maybe 40 minutes or an hour of talk time with maybe 8 to 10 hours of standby, all the way up to the super thick XT talk pack batteries, which could get you up to 2.5 hours of talk time and about 35 hours of standby. The early batteries were nickel cadmium, and they eventually came out with nickel metal hydride batteries, and finally the lithium ion types that we're still using to this day in our phones. Remember, these were analog phones running on the AMPS analog system. Analog technology was very power hungry, and phones just burned through batteries like nothing. So Motorola offered many battery choices to fit different consumer lifestyles. With the StarTAC, they had a challenge on their hands. They had to shrink the batteries way down in size to fit the phone, but without compromising on performance. It would have made no sense for them to offer a sleek new phone if the battery would die after a 20-minute phone call. It had to somehow be able to compete with its big brother and, of course, all the other handsets on the market. To solve this, Motorola did 3 things. First, they incorporated the extended talk feature into all of their analog StarTAC models. Originally, this was something they implemented on the old bag phones they sold during the 90s, and also on their top-of-the-line microTAC, the Elite. Basically, it cut the power output on the phone much lower when you were in an area with strong signal, and that of course would extend the battery life. Since most people tend to live in dense urban areas, this setting was generally left on, so users could enjoy a little more talk time. Motorola also ditched the nickel-cadmium batteries they'd been using since way back in the Dynatac days. They weren't terrible per se, but they had that dreaded memory effect problem where if you didn't totally drain the battery before recharging, it would develop this memory behavior where it seemed to remember what percentage was discharged, and that would become its new full capacity load, not letting you even use the remaining capacity. So given that most people wouldn't worry themselves about how or when to recharge their batteries, that tended to cut the lifetime of these batteries a lot, not to mention that they simply didn't hold as much charge as the newer chemistry batteries. With the nickel metal hydride batteries and the high-end lithium ion ones, the StarTAC phones could hold their own alongside all the other handsets you could choose from. But it didn't stop there. With these contacts on the back, you could actually add an auxiliary battery to basically double or even triple your battery life, easily surpassing performance on the microTAC series and many other phones out there. The StarTAC was the first handset to offer dual battery capability. Remember on the 3000 when we hit function 4 to check the battery meter and it said main on it? It was basically referring to the main battery it was running off. On the 6000 it does the same. But when you slap the piggyback battery onto it, the display says aux, letting you know that it's being powered by the secondary battery. If you press function 4 now, it'll show the remaining auxiliary battery life. Since the 3000 doesn't have dual battery capability, it's kind of pointless to call it the main battery. It's the only battery. So right there you can see that the 3000 and 6000 pretty much use the same software, regardless of features, even if the 3000 has a hell of a time trying to display it all. Another perk of dual batteries on the StarTAC is that they're hot swappable. So if you're in the middle of a call and your main battery dies, it'll automatically switch to the backup battery, and in the meantime you can switch out the dead battery with a fresh one so you don't skip a beat. Innovative stuff, man. So already you were enjoying a major upgrade over the 3000 with this 2 battery option. Now, getting back to the operations of the phone, we have that smart key again. Like I said, it's the StarTAC's OK button for various functions. First of all, it gets you into the phone book with one press. You can then scroll through the phone book not only with the pound and star keys, but with the volume keys on the side, which is nice. Once the save number that you want to call is on screen, holding down the smart key dials the call. Of course, with the analog networks offline for like 7 years now, dialing any number won't do anything on those anymore. But that's probably a good thing, as AMP's technology is, by today's standards, pretty clunky. It didn't offer a lot of bandwidth per cell site, no WAP functionality, and communications were not in any way encrypted. If you had a scanner that could pick up cellular frequencies, it wasn't really a problem listening into phone calls. Spooky, right? But anyway, the smart key. Pretty smart, right? Let's see. It also worked when dialing digits straight up. Dial your number and just hold it down. To hang up a call, same thing. Hold it down. And when you had an incoming call, yep, smart key to the rescue. This was especially handy when you had a hands-free headset, as you didn't have to open the phone to answer it. Just reach into your pocket and hit that button. And like I said earlier, no more function 1 to access the menu. Now it's function smart key. From there, you can scroll through the menu items with either the pound and star key or the volume keys. And to activate a menu item, you can hit stow, like 3000 to turn a feature on, and clear to turn it off, or just toggle it on and off with the smart key. So yeah, given that it's a contextual button that serves many different functions, it can be considered one of the first soft keys on a mobile phone, along with the soft keys on Nokia's 2100 series handsets, which hit the market around 1995. I myself had a 6000 back in the day. It was actually one of my first phones, and I found it a cinch to just browse through my phone book and dial a number or scroll through the menu items, change a ringer or what have you, all without really moving my thumb off the side of the phone. The only phone more innovative in my opinion was a few models that Sony put out at the time, and I'll get to them in a video later this year, I hope. Regardless, this layout worked just fine and made using the phone a breeze. So there you kinda got a taste of the alphanumeric screen. And with it came the option not only to store phone numbers, but a name also. To store a number with a name, just dial the number to be saved, hit stow, and enter the memory location desired. At this point you get the option of entering a name, or just saving the number as it is without the name by pressing the smart key. To enter a name, just start dialing it out. Dial each number until you get the right letter, and hit the pound key to move to the next space. You actually get 2 lines to type it out on, like if you want to have a first and last name. It'll just flash each line when you use 2 lines. Otherwise it just displays the 1 line if you only use 1. Your pick, folks. I mean, it's nice to have options, right? Speaking of which, you don't get 20 memory locations like the 3000. The 6000 gives you 99 locations for all your friends, family, pizza parlors, bookies, mistresses, dog groomer, you get the idea. It would make 0 sense being able to store that many digits without entering names to identify them all, so an alphanumeric display is actually pretty crucial. Not to mention you can actually read the menu items, not like that LED chicken scratch on the 3000. I mean, just look at the menu, it totally speaks the King's English, right? Well, kind of. Some of the abbreviations are still a bit funky, but hey, progress. Anyway, that in a large nutshell is what you got with the StarTAC 6000. So, how much did you have to shell out for one of these back in the day? Well, as the StarTAC line itself was still relatively new, not all vendors carried them initially. Motorola had special agreements with certain high-volume vendors in place to sell and promote Motorola's high-end offerings that they dubbed signature dealers. And they were generally the first to offer them, driving up demand and maintaining that whole aura of exclusivity. And consequently, trying to be the new kid on the block with the 6000 proved pretty costly. How costly? Try $800 costly. Yeah, that's right. Unactivated, you could pay anywhere from $649 to $799 for a StarTAC 6000. And some carriers offered it at $449 with activation, knocking $200 off the $649 price tag in exchange for pretty much your soul for 2 years. Other carriers pretty much cashed in on the initial exclusivity of the handset and made no concessions at all. But in all honesty, that's pretty much on par with what you'd pay today for the latest and greatest. Unlocked and without activation, you know. Specifically phones like the Samsung Galaxy and the iPhone whenever the new ones debut. If you waited long enough, the 6000 would drop down to pretty affordable levels. I remember getting mine for $99 with activation, not even 2 years after it debuted. But I guess for that little brief moment in 1996, you were a baller. Nowadays, these aren't very hard to come by. You should be able to score one online pretty easily for not too much cash. But if you do need help locating one, just hit me up and I'll try to locate one for you. I think I mentioned in the last episode that I would go over the menu features in these phones today, but I also said I would keep this relatively short. So I'll be getting to them in the next episode when we take a look at the next model up, the StarTAC 6500. I'll try to get to that one much sooner, and if you subscribe, you'll actually get notified when that episode hits the internet. Anyway, hope you found today's look at this little tech marvel enlightening. Thanks for watching. Take care.